Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. States are now starting to release their initial proposals for the BEAD program, and two states I was noticing have stated that anybody that has fixed wireless only is not served. Be right back with those details. Hey, Rick Uzzi with Quorum. Thanks for joining me for Broadband Deployment News. So I saw that Ohio sent out their initial proposal, or put out their initial proposal. So I took a look at that, and I noticed something in there, and then I looked at some others, and something that I saw in two of them, both Ohio and Vermont, state that if somebody has fixed wireless only, so if that's the only service that they have available, even licensed spectrum, that would mean, then they are not considered served, which is different from what you might have thought looking at the Notice of Funding Opportunity from the NTIA. So I thought I'd take a look at that today. So if you look at the NOFO from the NTIA on the BEAD program, you'll see here how they define reliable broadband service. So it says the term reliable broadband service means broadband service that the broadband data maps, so it's the FCC map, shows accessible to location via fiber optic technology, obviously, cable modem or HFC technology, DSL, digital subscriber line technology, or terrestrial fixed wireless technology utilizing entirely licensed spectrum or using a hybrid of licensed and unlicensed. So they were saying here that it's not reliable if it's completely unlicensed spectrum, but if it's a combination of licensed and unlicensed or completely licensed, then it's supposed to be kind of considered reliable broadband. And I think this includes CBRS spectrum that would be, quote, unlicensed because it's still by rule through the FCC kind of considered licensed because it's a general access license. And even though it's shared spectrum among many providers, there's a sharing system in place that's supposed to handle any kind of interference, those kinds of things. So I think even CBRS spectrum on general access licenses would be considered licensed, not just priority access licenses for CBRS. So you see that there, and then you see here for purposes of the BEAD program, locations served exclusively by satellite or services using entirely unlicensed spectrum or technology not specified by the Commission for purposes of the broadband data maps do not meet the criteria for reliable broadband service and so will be considered unserved. So according to the FCC broadband data maps, if a location has unlicensed fixed wireless, then it's supposed to be considered unserved. But if it's licensed or a combination of licensed and unlicensed, then it could be considered served. Or if it's DSL, it could be considered served. However, in the FCC, not the FCC, the NTIA, in their kind of model initial proposal, they have a couple of options here that they provide. You could go, this is for the challenge process, you can go completely with their kind of their suggested challenge process document, and you can have no modifications. It says the Broadband Office will make no modifications to the broadband maps list of unserved and underserved locations. Or you have an optional Module 2 for DSL lines, so you can say the Broadband Office will treat locations that the maps show to have available qualifying broadband service. In other words, a location that is served, delivered via DSL as underserved. So even though the maps say it's served because that has DSL service and it could be, let's say 100 by 20, you could consider it underserved because this DSL is older copper technology. And then it mentions some speed test modifications, says the Broadband Office will treat as underserved locations that the national broadband map should be served if rigorous speed test methodologies, for example, methodologies aligned to the BEAD Model Challenge Process speed test module, demonstrate that the served locations actually receive service that is materially below 100 by 20. So those are kind of the three modifications that are outlined into this NTIA kind of sample document that for these initial proposals. So as I mentioned, I was looking at Ohio when they came out. I'm going to look at first, I think here. No, I'm going to look first at Ohio. So this is the Ohio one. And so again, this is a draft State of Ohio initial proposal, Volume 1. So Volume 1 is something that states could get out sooner that covers the challenge process so they can kind of get things rolling quicker. So that's what these states are starting to introduce. Scroll down here to where I saw this. So just in the very beginning, in the intro, this is the introduction. It says they're kind of stating that they're going to do this. Requirement 7, detailed challenge process plan. This is the requirement for the initial proposal. including Ohio's selection of the following optional modules. So DSL modifications to phase out older technology. So they're going to take the NTIA up on that and say if it's DSL, it's going to be considered underserved. And then they mention here fixed wireless modifications to prioritize the utilization of fiber optic cable for last mile connections, except in extremely high cost per location areas. So if it's not an extremely high cost location area, they want to say that a area is going to be considered, in this case, unserved, not just underserved, but unserved. And we'll see that here in a minute. I'm going to go to the page that mentions that. I think it was down right here. So here's where they go into more detail. So again, modifications to reflect data not present in the National Broadband Map. And they first talked about the DSL here, which, as you saw, was mentioned in the NTIA's document. They say the Broadband Office will treat locations that the National Broadband Map shows to have available qualifying broadband service, for example, a location that is served, delivered via DSL as underserved. This modification will better reflect the locations eligible for BEAD funding because it will facilitate the phase-out of legacy copper facilities and ensure the delivery of future-proof broadband service. And that's a great, I'm glad that the NTIA put that in there, because if you've got areas that are claimed to be 100 by 20, as I've mentioned before, it could be that a few folks in that area get 100 by 20, but as you get further away from the central office or wherever the DSLAM happens to be that they connect to, your service can get slower and slower. So, and it's older copper technology. So even if it is kind of up to 100 by 20, that's about as fast as it's probably ever going to get. So it's better to maybe mark those as underserved so that you have an opportunity to go in there and put in fiber as part of the BEAD program. So they're doing that. And then it mentions fixed wireless modifications, which is not in that NTIA document. It says here, the Broadband Office will treat locations that the National Broadband Map shows to have available qualifying broadband service, or in other words, served, delivered via licensed fixed wireless technologies as unserved. So even if it's licensed fixed wireless technology, let's say T-Mobile is in there, or Verizon, or AT&T, or any fixed wireless operator that has licensed spectrum and they're able to deliver over 100 by 20 or better, that would normally be considered served, but yet they're saying that will be considered unserved. And it says this modification is consistent with Ohio's requirements defined in their Bill 33, which state that eligible addresses for broadband expansion are in an unserved area or a Tier 1 area are subject to the following definitions. And they got those definitions. So they've got something they call Tier 1 broadband service. And basically what they're saying is this is anybody that's underserved. A Tier 1 broadband service is underserved because they're stating here that it's greater than 25 by 3, but less than 100 by 20. So it's underserved. This is my typing right here. Then they have Tier 2 broadband service, and that's basically saying that that's a served area. It's over 100 by 20. So that's really considered served. Then they have a Tier 1 area. These are broadband services. So it's a Tier 1 broadband service, Tier 2 broadband service. That would be like kind of equivalent to a location, I think, or the service there. Then you've got Tier 1 area, means an area that has access, this would be a location as well, has access to Tier 1 broadband service, but not Tier 2. So basically that's saying an underserved area. So it's an area that has access to Tier 1 broadband service, but not Tier 2. So that would be, again, underserved. They've got somewhere between 25 by 3 and 120. 100 by 20. Then you've got a Tier 1 area. That would be basically an underserved area. Am I right here? So I get to 100 by 20, served. Tier 1, it means, let me look at this again. Oh, here it is. Here's where I'm looking. Yeah, so this is where I was looking. I'm sorry, the underserved area. I got confused there. So the Tier 1 area is an underserved area. Then you've got an unserved area, and that would be what an unserved area would be as far as the BEAD program goes. That's an area that is neither Tier 1 or Tier 2. So again, that would be an unserved area. It's less than 25 by 3, basically. It's not between 25 by 3 and 100 by 20, and it's not greater than or equal to 100 by 20. It's not served, so therefore it's unserved. So then they have their speed test modification in here. They're talking about that they will kind of follow that same thing that we saw in the NTIA sample initial proposal, where they're adopting that, where they're going to do they're going to have speed testing in place. And if it's, they say, as they put it here, if it, they say they'll treat it as underserved locations that, for rigorous speed test methodologies that align with the BEAD model, demonstrate that the served locations actually receive service that is materially below 100 by 20. So again, it's not, it's got to be materially below, and I'm assuming this means that, they're going to be checking certain times of day. And, if you got to make sure that probably a certain number of, if one or two customers are not reporting that, you've got to probably have a lot of data to be able to support that. So anyway, so that is Ohio. And then I looked around for the other state proposals, initial proposals. And by the way, I linked to these documents down below. I also linked to a page where you can find on the NTIA site where you can get to the initial proposals that have already been released. And I forgot to bring up that page right here, but it is in the descriptions below. So you can find that. In some cases, it's kind of hard to find them. So it'll link you to, for example, the Virginia BEAD program site, but then you got to kind of find out where that initial proposal is. It's not always completely evident. You might have to find another page or find it on that page. It's not always that easy to find, but there are links to those. And I linked to that particular NTIA site in the description of this video below, as well as these items that I'm showing you here. And then this is the Vermont one. So Vermont, I'm going to scroll down here. I think it was somewhere around page 30 something, I think. Yeah, here we are. So again, modifications to location classifications. And you can see both these documents have draft written all over them. So these are drafts. The states have made these available to the citizens in their state that now can, and others that can now review these and comment on them. So they're marked very clearly, obviously, as drafts. So again, they put in the DSL modifications, similar language, almost exactly the same if you look at it. The VCBB will treat locations in the national broadband map delivered via DSL as underserved. This will better reflect the locations eligible for BEAD funding. Same language, because it will facilitate phase out of legacy copper facilities and ensure the delivery of future-proof broadband service. So once again, if it's copper only, and again, this is where these are the only available options. So obviously, if there's fiber and DSL, that area is served and it's kind of moot. But if it's DSL only, or in this case of these two states, fixed wireless only, then those areas are considered unserved or underserved. In the case of Ohio, they're calling it unserved, not just underserved, but unserved. In the case of Vermont, they're calling it underserved, and we'll see that here. So here you see Vermont has their fixed wireless modifications. They've got this whole paragraph in red. I put a little highlighting in here in these two places, but the whole paragraph's in red, which may mean that they're acknowledging that this is not in the NTIA sample document, or maybe something was added later. Not sure. See fixed wireless modifications. This module is not included in the NTIA Model Challenge Process. That's what I was showing you here. So again, you've just got option 1, option 2, and option 3, and you've got the DSL option as far as the type of service. This is no modification. This is DSL, and this is the speed test stuff. So they are acknowledging here that this is not in the NTIA Model Challenge Process. And they say it's been added by the VCBB and is subject to review and approval by NTIA. And they give a little bit more reason here. They say, given Vermont's unique topography, dense seasonal foliage, and variable population densities, the VCBB does not believe terrestrial fixed wireless technologies can reliably deliver the speed and latency requirements for a location to be considered served under the IIJA. And again, that's not less than 100 by 20 and upload of latency less than or equal to 100 milliseconds. So they say consistent with the NTIA's DSL modifications and speed test modules, they will treat locations that the National Broadband Map shows to have available qualifying broadband service, location that is served, delivered via fixed wireless as underserved. So they're saying underserved as opposed to unserved. This modification will better reflect the locations eligible for BEAD funding because it will ensure the delivery of future-proof broadband service. So again, they're adopting that language that's in the sample, the model challenge process, as far as delivery of future-proof broadband service. So they're using the same reasoning, they're using the same language. In this case, again, they're talking about dense foliage foliage. And that's really something that is an issue with fixed wireless a lot of times, because you've got, and in Vermont, I'm sure, lots of pine trees. Pine trees have lots of needles. When needles get wet, so a lot of times that moisture, that wetness, and basically water you can see between the needles, and that is very effective at blocking wireless signals. It's just the right distance, it seems, to block wireless signals. So when you have a lot of pine trees and really dense foliage and leaves and all that kind of stuff, fixed wireless can be a challenge, and when it rains, even more so. So I think that is part of their reasoning right there. So you see 2 states. I looked at a few other states that put out the initial proposals, and I didn't see them mention this. So, some of them DSL, yes, they mentioned the DSL because, again, that's in the model challenge process from the NTIA, but I didn't. These are the only 2 that I saw mentioned fixed wireless. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know. I'm assuming somebody, I don't know if somebody at the NTIA said, hey, that might be possible. We didn't mention it in the challenge process. Could certainly be possible. So I think that might be why that's happening. I see here a question, Chris, nothing from the Virgin Islands. I haven't seen anything from the Virgin Islands as far as an initial proposal. So again, there's a link to where you can find those things in the description, where you can go to the NTIA site and you can find the 5-year plans. There's more 5-year plans that have been released. So there's a list of those, and then there's a list of the initial proposals that have come out that you'll see. So I don't think there was anything from the Virgin Islands yet on that. And sorry, again, I don't have that link available right now to look at. But so I thought this was interesting. Again, fixed wireless, I think it does make sense in some cases because, again, fixed wireless is not always going to be that reliable. And it really should be, I think it should be reserved for those really high cost locations. I think states should really focus on where it's going to be too expensive to do fiber. So if you've got let's say a national provider like T-Mobile again, or Verizon or AT&T, and they just blanket cover areas with fixed wireless service using CBRS spectrum or C-band spectrum, something like that, gives you fairly decent speeds, but then that limits you to that being the only technology. So the only technology you have available to you is a fixed wireless technology. Again, it can have some issues with attenuation, not so much in the mid-band spectrum, but still it's wireless. So there are attenuation issues, again, especially if you've got dense foliage, those kinds of things, that can be a problem. So I think it does make sense to really try to limit fixed wireless if we're going to be trying to get future-proof broadband. Let's call that fiber what it is. It's future-proof because it's going to allow you to expand to much, much faster speeds than DSL or fixed wireless. And that's what we want to try to do, is try to get everybody, if we can, on fixed wireless. And then there are going to be certain areas where that's going to be really expensive. I just said fixed wireless, everybody on fiber. There's going to be a lot of areas that are going to be very expensive to do fiber. And states might want to say, you know what, rather than break our budget and spend, $100,000 to get fiber to 3 customers on the top of this mountain, let's do fixed wireless for now. And then maybe in the future, we can figure out a way to do fiber to those customers, as costs come down or maybe more people move in. And you can maybe make a better case for doing that. But for right now, I think extremely high cost areas, fixed wireless is going to be an option. And what you don't want, again, is having a whole swath of areas considered served on the broadband map if they're fixed wireless only, when that will prevent you from getting funding to put in fiber, if that makes sense. Thanks for joining me today. If this was interesting or helpful, if you give me a like on the video, I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to a channel, click the subscribe button. Make sure you click the little bell next to it to be notified when I am live or when we post a video. Appreciate you joining me today. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.